Well, I am in the studio now and I'm joined by William Bird. He is Director Media Monitoring Africa, as well as Busi Litole. She is CNBC Africa's social media expert. And joining us via Skype is Amanda Stradom. She's Program Manager at Code for Africa in Cape Town. Ladies and gents, thank you for your time. Let me begin with you, William, and talk about the impact of, shall we open it up and say the internet, as part of discussing social media and the phenomenon that how shall I put it, revolution of data has brought into the voting process. 2004, I said it probably wasn't as bad as this, bad as in my words. And 1994, it probably wasn't even there. How big an impact has social media and the internet revolution changed the conduct of elections?
So I think that there are a couple of clear impacts. The one is there's certainly some potentially massive positive impact around people knowing when the voting day is happening, the ease with which we can spread and disseminate information around critical issues for the elections, the ease with which media organizations can spread their messages, that we know when voting day is, that we can act on things that you can have in a moment's notice, all sorts of reports with evidence saying this is what's happening at this voting station. Because it's to a degree almost leveled that playing field, allowing anyone with a mobile device who knows how to use it reasonably well, they can report on things. So to a degree it's brought all of us a lot closer. At the same time, however, that same leveling effect has also meant that people who are out to undermine and destroy our democracy, people who are out to disinform people, are now able to spread messages just as easily. So it's not that these issues of mis and disinformation are new. Yeah. It's just that what the shift to digital and the internet has done is it's made their ability to spread those things massive. And their return on investment is huge, because you can reach so many more people. Yes. For relatively low cost for all of these people that are trying to do it. So it's had a significant impact. Yeah. And what is clear is that impact in South Africa is only really being felt in these elections. I think by the time we get to 2021, for the next local government elections, it's going to be even greater. Yeah. And by the time we get to the next general elections, it'll be even greater still. So this is, we're still in a semi-experimental phase. I don't think that we've sufficiently done good enough things with the potential positive value of the internet and social media platforms. And equally, we fortunately at this point don't seem to have endured some of the worst and darkest elements of it.
Yeah, as I was coming in on the Guardian website, for instance, I saw a story that says that 241 million Europeans may have been exposed to disinformation promoted by social media accounts that are linked to Russia. So when you compare that to us here, it does look like our problem is a little bit better. Let me put it that way.
Well, yes. I mean, we've still got huge issues with access. You know, data costs are still exorbitantly high, so there's still an issue of everyone needing to be on the internet. Whereas, of course, for most of Europe, certainly Western Europe, that's not your major challenge. There, your major challenge is that you've got to make sure that people get access to decent information.
Yeah, Amanda, can I come to you? Your initial thoughts on the impact of social media that we're seeing in these elections when you look, when you compare with the past?
Well, we've certainly seen a big influence on these elections, specifically in South Africa, and it's been a run-up, I think, from the ANC electoral conference that we saw 2 years ago, where there was a very strong influence from the NDC group, the RET group, that really tried to push one message versus the Cyril Ramaphosa group during that time. So from there, we've definitely seen a big increase in kind of a misinformation war that's been spreading. Even today, we've seen a number of places talking about misinformation around the election station. So, for instance, saying that you cannot go and vote with fake nails or with nail polish on. So there's definitely, which sounds minor, but actually becomes part of a bigger problem to spreading misinformation.
Yeah, actually, what's the position on those fake nails? Can you vote with fake nails?
Yes, you can. The IEC has said a few times now
Yeah.
that you can vote with fake nails, you can vote with nail polish on. It's completely fine. You won't be sent away. At a few stations this morning, there were signs up saying that you could not vote, but subsequently the IEC has announced that that's nonsense.
Yeah, I suppose you could also ask the question, can you vote with fake hair? It doesn't matter, really, does it? But see, if I can come to you, you've been doing crunching some numbers in terms of how the political parties have been using social media in these elections. Give us a sense of what you got.
Okay, so Godfrey, the use of social media in 2014 compared to now has increased tremendously in the growth in South Africa. I mean, if you look at the ANC, they have over 600,000 followers on Twitter.
Only?
Yes.
Only 600,000?
Only 600,000. And then the DA have over 500,000. And then the youngest out of the three, the EFF, has over 700,000. And a lot of those users are, in fact, young people because they dominate the social media space.
Yeah.
So this, obviously, with the political parties, they've had to work harder on their strategy on social media.
Yeah.
And they've had to go beyond that and actually get influencers and celebrities to actually help them out in terms of endorsing their favorite political parties. Now, whether that is going to translate into voters is another story.
Absolutely. It's interesting because, I mean, when you look at the total numbers on social media use in South Africa, I think they're running the millions, right?
Absolutely.
And yet you've got these political parties and their numbers are around the hundreds of thousands. I'm just wondering if they are fully leveraging the power and impact and reach of social media.
Well, Godfrey, it's not just about, basically when you're trying to promote your political party, it's also the kind of content that you are pushing out.
Yeah.
So we are obviously in a digital space, and if you're targeting the younger audience, you need appealing content that's going to appeal to younger people. So we saw that with the ANC. They had an advert where it was full of social media influencers, because I mean some of these social media influencers have like over 1 million followers on Twitter. So it's also like the content and the people that you kind of select in order to leverage off of that.
Yeah. William, when you look at how the political parties have used social media, do you get the sense that these guys have fully utilized what they could do with social media? I mean, you look at someone like Julius Malema, for instance. I think he's got more than 2 million followers, and yet from Busi's figures, from what she's telling us, clearly it doesn't look like that's being fully utilized. Are we savvy when it comes to technology and social media and integrating it within our politics here in this country?
No, I mean, I'm not sure that our parties quite understand, how to utilize it really that effectively.
Yeah.
And to a degree, that's probably a good thing, because it means that the moment they become fully aware, then they're likely to do all sorts of even more dodgy things, as is the nature of political parties the world over. But if you look at, we just did some analysis on looking at the ANC's Twitter behavior, and what we found is that of the 14 of their most prolific, of their top 20 accounts that were responsible for much of their retweeting over a particular week, 14 of them were created at the start of the election period, which suggests that these are not real people.
This is yesterday.
These are things that have been set up to deliberately be there to help spread the message. So it seems to suggest that they go, okay, how do we start to boost this? Okay, we need to create followers that are going to just retweet our content and give it the kind of traffic that we need.
Yeah.
Which seems appropriate to a degree, but of course that could be an indication that they were up to things that were less than entirely legitimate. So, the answer to that is some of our people and some of our politicians are incredibly astute when it comes to media, manipulating media and using media. I don't think there's anyone better in the country than Julius Malema at directing a news agenda.
Yeah.
But certainly even the EFF around their usage of social media is not something that you can say they use it to the most positive value. Certainly you can say that when it comes to negative things, if you want to look at the trolls, those people have got that down to a fine art. If you say certain things and they send their trolls after you, you're going to have a very unpleasant time.
Yeah, Amanda, I want your thoughts on this as well. And at the same time, I'm also asking you an extra question, just in terms of the relevance of social media in driving the political message. Does social media set itself up as appropriate for driving political messages, or is it just for frivolous things and sharing pictures and those kind of things?
I think it definitely drives a political message, and I think with the American elections, we certainly saw that that the social media sphere has a very significant impact on how people speak to political parties, how people disseminate information. So there is very much a strong influence. As William mentioned, there has also been nefarious characters that are used, for instance, in creating bot networks to perhaps amplify specific messages around elections, around a certain message that you might want to get out. So sometimes it's a good one, sort of or not a good one, but sometimes it's a good one in the sense that it can promote a point that a political party wants to make, but at times it can really be to push an agenda that is false, isn't or is a specific spread of misinformation.
Absolutely. So when you look at your numbers in terms of the usage of social media by the political parties, who would you say actually has effectively used social media?
Well, as mentioned, it would definitely be someone like Julius Malema, who I think is very active and who seems to respond to things. I don't like the
Julius
way that the party
Malema,
has
the
been
individual, not the economic freedom fighters, the party.
Oh, I see. I don't think that the EFF has handled it best. It really has been driven by sort of individuals within their organization rather than the parties themselves.
Yeah. You wanted to add something, William?
Yeah.
So if you look at the percentage of original content against retweets, and that would suggest, so retweet is just, and this is just Twitter now, obviously.
Yeah.
So what you'd like to see is more original content and genuine engagement with the various
messages and
with the various people engaging with each other. The moment you're just retweeting, it's just like, shouting it out, hey look, right? It's not something that says, these are our views. And the ones there that the ANC, 83% of their content over this period was retweets, 77% for the DA and 93% for the EFF.
Oh, goodness.
So it's an interesting kind of an element to look at around the official accounts as to how much engagement they're getting around those things. Of course, you then do find personalities, and of course social media drives towards personalities and that kind of idea where you've got various personalities who will then have huge followings and then drive a lot of content and discussion. The moment they start to talk about something, that then gets picked up.
Yeah. So let's shift the discussion a little bit to fake news. Can we definitively declare that we don't have a problem in South Africa in terms of fake news?
No, look, there are two things. The first is we steer away from calling it fake news for the simple reason that that's usually a term used by people deliberately to undermine the credibility of legitimate media.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is that the moment you say it's fake, it isn't news.
Mm.
So what we prefer to do is say, let's look at issues of misinformation and disinformation, and misinformation being spreading false information, but not necessarily with intent, and disinformation being spreading false information with the intent to cause harm or to undermine our electoral processes. And if you look at those things, then yes, the answer is yes, we do have a problem with those issues in as much as we have a problem with them globally.
Yeah.
Is there extent and are the kinds of systems that we've seen internationally set up impacting us in the same way? It doesn't at this stage, fortunately, seem to be as deep a problem as experienced elsewhere. There has been evidence that some nefarious entities were contacted, but whether or not they've been successful in their plans, that doesn't seem to be the case. But it certainly is there.
Yeah, thanks to higher data costs.
Well,
never thought I'd say that. But see, what about the media's handling of fake news as well within South Africa? Just general guidelines, I suppose.
So I think that it's very important to point out that the media have a responsibility. So if you have a story or you think that there might be a story in a tweet or whatever it is that you're seeing on social media, you have the responsibility to make sure that obviously it's true. So it's better to be, because I know a lot of people want to break news. A lot of people, people by media, they want to break a lot of news. So it's better to be second and correct than to be first.
In other words, when
wrong.
you're using social media as a lead as a potential source for your stories, before you retweet it, from a news perspective, just make sure that you actually have seen the source, or at least it's coming from the source that claims to be the source.
Yes, and also have a look at the social media profile of that person putting out this information.
Well, if it's William, I know it's William right now.
Exactly.
The trouble is to make sure that it's actually William, not William the bot, or William was being created by somebody else.
If it's an egg, if the picture of the person is an egg, it's probably
Are there still
fake.
eggs on social media?
Well, a few eggs, but I mean, William did say that the ANC did start out some new accounts, so some might have eggs on it. So if there's an egg, it's probably not true.
Absolutely. There's stuff to negotiate without question. Absolutely. Okay, so we continue our coverage. Now, while millions of South Africans will enjoy part of today as a day away from work, some businesses are still on duty. Of course, we're still here. CNBC Africa's Yolanda Mabanga spoke to some of these entrepreneurs to ask how important it is for them to be at work today.
I think we need to be very mindful of some of the social issues that we are facing as small businesses and just stuff that's happening in the industry, And preparing for a day like this, I think as a small business owner, you need to look at, okay, cool, who in the political space is actually trying to aid us in achieving certain goals that we have as small businesses, who's trying to help us overcome the challenges that we are facing as small businesses.
And then for your small business, what expectations are you expecting from these elections?
I'm looking for someone that's really going to come out and say, okay, cool, we've identified what small businesses in the South African landscape are facing, and these are some of the processes that we want to take as a plan of action to actually assist them in achieving X, Y, and Z, because there's so much happening in the small business space. I've read an article where it said that small businesses in South Africa fail between their first to 5 years, and which is very scary, because I feel like we are the future and we can aid unemployment in this space.
I'm here at Cafe Baptiste, and I'm here with the head chef, Johan, who has just come back from voting, I understand.
I have. Well, I haven't quite succeeded, so I'll have to go back later. Unfortunately, they opened very late. They opened about 40 minutes late, and then they only had one scanner that managed to die on us with a massive queue.
So it died on you just before you were able to vote, I'm sure with you and a number of other people.
Yeah, quite a large number of people. So they were still waiting for it. Unfortunately, I had to come to work, so I couldn't wait there all day.
Okay. What do you think, how do you feel this election is going to help the economy in the future?
Well, look, I do think it's very important. Do you know what? I believe they need to do a lot more for small businesses like us. Currently, it's not sustainable with all the fluctuations in the currency. I mean, if you look at the rand and load shedding, it's hard.
I mean, like, I'm an entrepreneur, so public holidays or not, I have to work, because we have to deliver work for clients on time, and we usually do this like daily. Sometimes we work 7 days, with no resting. We cross night, so we have to make sure that the client is happy at the end of the day. So elections but work comes first as well.
Yeah, young people at work, and here we are at CNBC Africa covering live these elections in 2019 that are going to determine who's going to be the President of South Africa. Of course, in terms of schedule, of course, the polls are open until 9 p.m. today. And if you are at a voting station in a queue by 9 p.m., they will allow you to vote. So vote count is going to continue late into the night. Then the counting of the votes begins immediately after the voting has ended. And then we are hoping, we've been told by the IEC, that by Saturday we should have a result coming out of these elections. At this particular point in time, though, we're talking about social media and its impact on these elections and how people have used social media within the elections. In the studio with me, if I may remind you, I have William Bird, he's Media Monitoring Africa Director, and I also have Busi Letole, she is CNBC Africa social media expert, and via Skype in Cape Town, I have got Amanda Straydon, Program Manager at Code for Africa. Let's go to Cape Town to Amanda. Amanda, we have also seen a few guidelines from the IEC in terms of how people behave when they go to the voting booths. You know, this is the day, of course, of selfies and tweeting and all those kind of things. And I gather some people have fallen foul of the rules. Let's just remind people again what is and what is not allowed.
So one of the things that's definitely not allowed is that you're not allowed to tweet your ballot for a number of reasons, but you're not allowed to tweet your once you've voted your ballot paper is one of the big things that the IEC has pushed. In terms of what isn't allowed, what else isn't allowed, there aren't sort of major issues that they've highlighted except the ballot.
Yeah. William, are you allowed to take your phone into the voting booth?
You can take it in with you as long as you don't use it. I mean,
what about if I get a call while I'm trying to vote?
Well, then the electoral officer may well try and stop you, because I don't think that it's meant to be a time for you to be having chats. And I'd recommend that if you want to take an urgent call, you wait a while and then go and vote once you've dealt with your urgent call. But I mean, and there are logical and good reasons for these. You know, we've seen before this rumor that says, you know, we'll give you 1,000 rand once you prove that you voted for XYZ party.
Oh, really?
And, you know, so you go and the idea being you go in and you take a picture of you with your ballot, a selfie, and then you go out and then theoretically you get your 1,000 rand to do it. Of course, so that's one of the reasons why you can't be going and taking images of
No, but I'm just struggling to
but
understand.
also because you may manipulate how people perceive how voting is going if you are doing that.
Yeah, so I'm just struggling to understand why, though, they won't allow us to show who I voted for. Because I'm looking at Julius Malema's account here on Twitter, and he says, I am voting EFF 8 May. You know, so there are some people who we know who they are going to be voting for. Yeah. Why am I not allowed to crow and tweet about it? No,
you can go and say, I voted for whichever party you like, but you can't show your ballot paper. There's nothing stopping you saying, going and standing on a street corner or anywhere and saying, I voted for the Banana Party. You know, you're perfectly entitled to do so. But on social media, you can't, for the reasons I outlined, you can't go and take a picture of your ballot and say, this is who I voted for. It's a breach for those reasons because you potentially put the elections at risk if you go and do that, you know?
Yeah, but see, one of the issues we saw was around the fingernails, fake and otherwise. But if I take a picture of my thumb or my finger and showing that I've voted, surely that's good enough as evidence that I've voted, right?
Absolutely.
Except they won't know that this is my finger and this is not anybody else's finger.
Basically, but yes, in terms of your finger, you can take as many pictures as you like of that.
Yeah.
I'm showing that that you have a fake nail and you were able to vote.
Maybe people know my particular fake nail, so.
But I mean, you could have changed it last night. So, I mean, but to answer your question, yes, you can definitely take that.
Yeah.
But one thing that they did also point out is that voters need to make sure that your ballot paper has a stamp. So, because if it doesn't have a stamp, it doesn't count. So
right.
It's just one thing that voters can look out for while they're making their mark.
Yeah, so I'd imagine if you saw that your ballot paper doesn't have a stamp, you are allowed to come out and show the official and then go back in again.
So I think they'd have to probably give you another ballot paper unless you can hide who you voted for. But yes, you can ask them to stamp your ballot paper, because if it doesn't have a stamp, they're not going to count it.
Yeah. As we round up the discussion, I wanted to talk a little bit about the impact in terms of the outcomes of this election. William, if I can come to you, have you seen any evidence that, say, for instance, if this election were in 1994, where we know there was no social media, and we compare it to today, where we've got a social media, a party that would have had social media behind it would have gotten an advantage because of social media? Or are we really just talking about the urban population? Because we do know that this, of course, in terms of coverage, in the rural areas, is not as extensive.
So there's no doubt that it still is able to shape and help shape influences, views and perspectives. So even though we don't have access for all in South Africa, if you're able to influence the influencers and help shape their narratives, then certainly you would be more likely to garner greater interest, not necessarily greater votes. I mean, and that's because you can have extensive coverage of your political party and still not get that many votes because, you know, voting behavior ultimately, when you go into that little cardboard box and cast your ballot, there are any number of things that will determine where you ultimately put your X. And so, but certainly, yes, what it does do is it means this perennial challenge of equitable coverage. When you've got 48 parties, the moment you assume or you put us in a state where every party has access and all people have access to the internet and unlimited and quality data, for example, then it means that if I want to go and start the banana party, I can start the banana party and I can spread. Sorry?
A content party.
Yeah, a content party, and I can start and spread as much information as I like. And I can have as many lunatics heading up the party as I like. And I can get almost as much traction if my messages are well constructed as some of the very well established parties.
Absolutely.
And that's good for democracy.
It is good for democracy. So interesting to the point that I was making about perhaps the preponderance of this happening within the urban areas. On Google, apparently in the last 72 hours before the election, in terms of searching for elections in South Africa, they found the top cities or top places where people are talking about Sandton, apparently topping, and then Randburg, Centurion, Stellenbosch, and then Edenville. And then, as you can see on your screen, in terms of some of the top searches related to the elections, you can see there that South Africa elections 2019 is dominating those searches. Busi, is that something that you've been looking at?
So, yes, certainly.
So you have some people are asking where is my next voting station, but predominantly people are asking the question South Africa 2019, which is crazy, isn't it? Because we all know today is a holiday.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it really doesn't make sense. Yeah, and then I also looked at this Google map, and this Google map in terms of who are people searching for. You will not believe it, but you will believe it because you called it first. Julius Malema tops in terms of who people are searching for, followed by Cyril Ramaphosa. Third is Mmusi Maimane, and then 4 is Vuyo Zungula.
That's not surprising, actually.
It is not.
No, because the EFF have been able to tap into the youth, and they are the most users on Google, on the internet. So it doesn't really come as a surprise. I would be expecting them to be searching for Julius Malema.
Yeah, I wanted to check with you, Amanda, in terms of these searches and the outcome of the elections. Is there any correlation that you potentially see between the things that people are searching for on the internet? I mean, Julius Malema is topping it, and then when you look at it on a party basis, the ANC is top at number 1, and then second, followed by the Economic Freedom Fighters, then the Democratic Alliance third. Is there any kind of correlation that we could try and see? And after the elections, if it's a good thing that people are searching for you, and whether that potentially leads to votes?
Well, I can't say whether it would have an influence on a voting thing, but it would mean that someone is possibly interested in what is the party saying, what is Julius Malema doing, what is Cyril Ramaphosa doing or saying, and it could very much also indicate what are people interested in terms of what they should fear or what they should avoid. Or so it is. It's really indicative of what are people interested in rather than necessarily what people are voting for.
Absolutely. William, you want to add?
No, I mean, I think that's...
Is there not?
As much as these are useful tools, ultimately it comes down to making sure that you're sufficiently well informed about who you're going to vote for and on what basis you want to vote for them. And again, this is where the internet is a really useful thing, because for most parties, you type in their name, clinky clonk, and away you go, and you usually get a very nice summary, and it'll also take you to their website so you can find out things about them. And again, you know, against that, of course, the point that Amanda raised are things of what people should fear. So what we are seeing is that around elections, where there's this level of uncertainty, people that are wanting to undermine our democracy, they go and they target you on the basis of of fears, and often irrational fears. This whole thing about fingernails, about saying you must make sure you take a pen with you to vote, because if you use a pencil, they'll rub it out and put in a cross somewhere else. You know, it's that kind of nonsense that if you look at it in a fairly cold, rational light, you're going to go, well, of course the IEC is not going to do that kind of thing. But when you're starting to feel a little bit uncertain and a little bit, you think, oh gosh, could that be true? Are they going to stop this from happening? And what does it mean for everyone if this is how they're going to do it? Because you operate off this idea that there's a they that is trying to drive some kind of an agenda to destabilize or take your vote away or do all sorts of crazy things for whatever nefarious ends. And that's why it's really important that people rely on credible media to get their information, to make sure that they go to the party's original websites, and then get your sources from diverse areas, places.
Absolutely. You actually remind me of a story that I saw. It's a survey that was done. I can't remember the name of the organization, but apparently 68% of Africans don't believe their vote is secret.
Wow.
Which is crazy when you think about it. And then the number for South Africa, interestingly, where you would think perhaps people have more access to information, is actually the same level. An average 68% don't believe their vote is secret. So perhaps there are things that need to be done here in terms of education and educating people, because I think South African elections have been held up to be credible every single time that we've gone to elections in the democratic era. But let me thank my guests for participating in our discussion today. Busile Tole, CNBC Africa Social Media; William Bird, Director, Media Monitoring Africa; as well as via Skype, Amanda Straydon, Program Manager at Code for Africa. Thank you very much, both, all of you. Now, with 9.8 million eligible voters not registering to vote, is it time for the Electoral Commission of South Africa to take votes electronically? This is what Janet Love, a commissioner at the Electoral Commission, had to say on the matter.
At the moment, you can register online, but of course, in order to do that, you need to have not just your ID number, but you need to know that when you actually go and do your initial registration, you are somebody who's got the ID that you can go and present it. So first and foremost, you have to have your ID. Once you've got your ID and you go to an IEC office to present your ID, your other registration activities can be done online. But we can't have people registering if they don't have valid IDs. And the valid IDs, as we know, are issued by the Department of Home Affairs as the issuing authority.
And voting electronically?
Okay, so voting electronically, just to maybe put the different stages of voting or different stages of engagement with the voting process that could be electronic. So as I've said, when it comes to registration, that's one component. And although we have got the possibility for registering and updating your address and all the rest of it online, there's a first stage, which is something that relates to your ID and in that sense, the validation of your citizenship and your right to vote. And that's something that the law requires another institution to do. So when it comes to the registration process, that's the kind of arrangement we have, and biometrics and so on would suggest that even though biometrics that the Department of Home Affairs engages in, that to get those done, you at this stage have to be in person somewhere presenting yourself. Now that you've registered, there is then the process of ensuring that the place where you've registered and the place where you go and vote, that they're kind of aligned. So if you're voting for a provincial election, you need to be in the province within which you are registered to vote in order to be able to cast your provincial vote. And so again, and obviously that's even more complex when it comes to a local government situation. So what we have is a situation where at this stage we do have maps that are available and are in that sense available at the voting station to check that you correctly registered. And there is a machine that we call the ZipZip machine that people are a bit familiar with, that we've used for some years, which sort of relate your ID number to being at the correct voting station. And you may have read, but we're hoping we're needing and hoping to ensure that we upgrade that technology, because it's already reaching from just a point of view of its own survival, the later end of its lifespan. And with the development of technology, GPSing and mapping and so on is a much more easily available technology. So again, that's something that there's an electronic element that we already use, but doubtless will be enhanced with our new voting registration device that we hope to introduce. Then you get to, after the ballot paper has been finalized, is it physical, a ballot paper, a piece of paper, or is it, in some machine? And that is something that we don't foresee as being something that we would introduce in the immediate time. And part of the reason for that is because we engage very widely with people in other parts of the world to look at the different kinds of systems and equipment that are in play. And there's a lot of possibilities, but there's nothing that we can say, there's a proof of concept and it's operational and it's working very widely, and we think that time is ripe for us to bring this on board.